All right, on Tuesday, you get to vote whether or not, if you live in the city, if you want an MLS stadium. And the man to talk about all the ins and outs is Jeff Rainford. Jeff Rainford, welcome back, Big 550 KTRS.
McGraw, good morning.
The show starts at 9:10, you know.
Well, I had 9:15. I apologize.
Oh, okay, all right, fair enough. All right, good. All right, so you are, what's your official title in this bailiwick?
Well, I guess you could say I'm the campaign manager for the campaign to win approval for Props 1 and 2.
Okay. All right, so the first thing is, this is kind of confusing. Prop 1 is the Metrolink tax.
Correct.
Prop 2 is the MLS stadium. But they both have to pass?
They do, but the way I explain it to people is they both got to stand on their own 2 feet. So if you are for making Metrolink safer and then expanding it, and this also, Prop 1 can also be used for surveillance crime cameras in our neighborhoods and to beef up the real-time crime center that the police have, which was put together really with grants and is not state-of-the-art. Prop 1 can also be used for neighborhood economic development. If you're for that, vote yes on Prop 1. Prop 2 is a small business tax mostly paid by corporations. It is true that if the sales tax goes up, this so-called use tax will also go up. But we didn't have to have a vote on Prop 2. You didn't have, the use tax goes up automatically if the sales tax goes up. But in Prop 2, the mayor, the Board of Aldermen, and the people trying to bring MLS here said we need to have a vote. So Prop 2 would take this small tax on businesses known as a use tax, which is a sales tax that corporations pay. Anheuser-Busch pays when they bring in the goods to make beer.
Right.
That small tax on Prop 2 would go for a multipurpose stadium that would bring us an MLS team. So I actually make it real simple. Vote on Prop 1 if you want to expand Metrolink, make our neighborhood safer, make Metrolink safer. Vote on Prop 2 if you want to use a small business tax known as the use tax for the MLS soccer.
But if Prop 1 fails and Prop 2 succeeds,
then there would be no increase in the use tax.
And the MLS stadium would
be. And the MLS stadium wouldn't happen. I'm not particularly worried about that. Metrolink's very popular. Making Metrolink safer, as you can imagine, is really popular right now.
Right.
So I don't really see one failing and 2 passing. So that's why, with great confidence, I say vote on 1 if those are the right priorities for you, and vote on 2 if you believe in what we're talking about how great having a soccer team and all the associated benefits would be.
Yesterday, we got on the topic conversation, and I said, and a couple of callers agreed with me, that if this stadium vote was being taken in St. Charles, and same deal for St. Charles, it would be passed overwhelmingly by the people of St. Charles because they realized the benefits of it. And if it were in the county voters would overwhelmingly pass this because they understand the economic benefit and the prestige and everything else. It seems like the city voters, or some people in the city, want to shoot themselves in the foot, even though this is a really good deal for the city of St. Louis.
It is a really good deal for the city of St. Louis. Listen, this is not a massive deal. We're talking about a $155 million project, $95 million private, 60 public. So it's not a massive project, but for a project this size, it is going to bring back, the city's contribution is a business tax, so consumers aren't paying it. It'll cost about $3.8 million a year, and the stadium itself conservatively will bring back on average $5.4 million. So just on those simple economics, it makes sense. Then you take into account you got 22 acres that have sat vacant for decades and will likely sit vacant for decades. What it'll do for the western part of downtown. Then you have the jobs. Then you have, I always hear from some city people, oh, most of the fans are going to be from outside the city. That's what we want. We want to give people more reasons to come into the city and spend money. That's the whole idea, is to give people reason to do it. And then the owners also threw in, they've taken all of the risk. The owners are all in, not just the stadium, going to put in $250 million of investment. Any other time anybody would be talking about $250 million investment with about a 10% subsidy, we'd be falling all over each other. Usually there's about a 50% subsidy.
Right.
And they're taking all of the risk. Cost overruns, they will take care of the upkeep in the stadium, and they're signing a 30-year lease. So unlike the Rams, there won't be any funny business like the Rams. So, we're certainly doing everything we can to help people understand. We're not making any grand promises. We're not saying that this is the silver bullet, but the thing that really convinces me the most is that soccer is a young, millennial sport. Twice as many young kids are playing soccer as football. And when you go to these games in other places, you see that energy. It's just different than baseball. Baseball's good. I'm a baseball fan.
Right.
But this is the kind of thing we need if we want to be the kind of city where we are going to attract the kind of brain power we need for our workforce.
Seems like, Jeff Rainford, that this is and I don't want to parrot the owners of this MLS deal, but they make the point that this is a convergence of a number of things at the right moment, at the right time, that if this passes, great. If it fails, we might never have this opportunity again.
Well, we won't have an MLS opportunity. There are 11 other cities that want an MLS franchise. And let's just be honest with each other. The reason we have this opportunity, and I heard Jim Cavanaugh from Worldwide Technology say it last night, the reason we have this opportunity is because of what the NFL and the Rams did to us. And MLS sees an opportunity. They do believe that we are a 3-sport, maybe 4-sport, but at least a 3-sport city. And they know that we are it is not a falsehood. We are the soccer capital of the United States. Now, that's largely because we're a very Catholic community, and soccer is a big Catholic sport.
Sure.
But MLS sees an opportunity here, but there are 11 other cities that want an MLS franchise right now, and they're not going to give 11 out. You know, it was an extraordinary thing when Don Garber, the commissioner, came to St. Louis. He clearly wants it to be here. I assume he will be able to round up his owners because they're the ones technically who vote on it. If we pass Propositions 1 and 2, we are the soccer capital. We have a huge soccer pedigree. Some of the greatest soccer players in the country come from St. Louis. And if we don't do this, we will not have an MLS franchise. It's ever, I don't know, but certainly for another decade. And I do want to remind people who are listening, who are city voters and who are for this, you're getting the opportunity. We heard in the Rams thing,
right.
We didn't have our opportunity to vote. There was no requirement, no legal requirement to have a vote. We chose to have a vote because people said they want to have a vote. Well, your chance is Tuesday between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m. It ain't going to be on Wednesday or Thursday. You got one shot at it. So, Tuesday's the day.
I've said that if you don't want it and you hate soccer and you hate corporate welfare for billionaires, the nice thing is that you're not going to pay for it, right? You don't buy a ticket, there are no taxes, right? If you don't want this and it goes through, no skin off your nose.
And I always hear people don't really understand the use tax. I've actually have friends of mine who own small businesses say, hey, am I going to have to pay this? And I say, well, are you paying the use tax today? And they're like, I never heard of the use tax. Well, then you're not going to pay it. Okay? Anheuser-Busch is the biggest payer of the use tax. And, whatever happens to droughts wherever they grow barley has like a exponentially greater impact on them than this use tax. It's so small that Anheuser-Busch is, the lobbyist for Anheuser-Busch has been helpful in trying to help us get this passed. I mean, they haven't taken a formal position, but they've been helpful. This is a tax on businesses and mostly on corporations, and it is not a consumer tax. So sure, is it going to be baked in to a can of beer somewhere? Yes, but I mean, beer prices are not going to go up. The whole tax only raises $3.8 million a year, and to put that in perspective, the entire city budget is $1 billion. So, sometimes we hear from people, well, let's spend it on something else. Does anybody really believe that the city, if it got an extra $3.8 million, that we're going to see anything like what we're going to see with this facility? We are not going to see less crime with it. We're not going to see better schools with it. We're not going to see more affordable housing with it. It's just going to go into the budget, never to be seen for again. And I get back to the Rams deal, and I worked on that, but after they treated us, now we know the character of that league. I'm actually glad that they left. But one of the things the opponents said in that is, well, let's let the Rams leave and use all that money for schools and crime and other things. Well, where's the money? Okay, are the schools way better today because the Rams left? Is crime better today because the Rams left? The money just never appears. So you've got this real thing, this MLS soccer with this $5 million community benefits agreement, the jobs, and mostly the excitement for younger people because they love this sport. It's the sport of the future in this country. You'll have something real rather than it just disappearing into the city budget.
Kickboxing, I believe, is the sport of the future.
Kickboxing?
Kickboxing. If you believe, if you believe John Cusack in Stand By Me, or no, Say Anything. Kickboxing, sport of the future. All right. So with this $3-point-something million, that's $3.8 million. How much are the owners kicking in to supplement that $3.8 million?
So the owners are putting in $95 million for the stadium, $150 million for the franchise fee, and about they don't really know for sure, but $30 to $80 million in startup costs. I don't think it'll be 80, but 30, 40, $50 million in startup costs. So they're putting in $255 million at a minimum to the city's $3.8 million. The other thing is this $3.8 million will be used to borrow money and up to $50 million. And if for some reason the markets or the use tax doesn't come in or whatever, and there's not enough money, the owners have to make up for that. So there's no impact on the city budget. Won't have to cut anything. As a matter of fact, there was a meeting this morning with the St. Louis Police Officers Association, and I don't know that they took a formal position, but when they fully understood the deal, they're certainly going to say they're supportive. I don't know if they're actually taking an endorsement position,
right,
but they understand, like other people, like your original point, which is in the city, we have got to find ways to bring more people into the city to live, more people in the city to visit, more jobs into the city, and then we'll have tax revenue for all the things, for all the services that our low-income citizens and our at-risk kids in our neighborhoods need. But if we start spending what money we have without making these investments to bring more money into the city, to me, it's sort of like a farmer feeding his feed corn to his cows. Eventually, he's going to have no corn, and that's not a route that we can take.
You and I have gone around and around on all sorts of things. We've been on the same side. We've been on opposite sides. We've agreed and disagreed. This one, though, it isn't like you're building a big box store taking away from other small businesses. There is no other soccer team. This is a cultural benefit for all. And it's $255 million of money that's being invested here for a small fraction of this sort of tax. It seems like it's a win for everybody because going forward for the next 50 years, we're going to have another cultural institution to rally around.
Not only that, but these owners will invest, having people that have the kind of money that they can write checks for $255 million. One of the mistakes we've made in the past in St. Louis is we've counted on developers who didn't have any of their own money. And we've seen what has happened with that. And I won't name names, but we've seen projects go bankrupt and go under because the developers didn't have their own money. These owners, when they have to write checks for this, they can't borrow off of this because the MLS is not going to go along with that. These are the kind of people we want investing in our city. And I think if they get this project and they bring MLS here, I think they will be an even bigger part of our city, not just our metropolitan area, but our city. And so, at the end of the day here, there are people who are like, well, I'm not a soccer fan, I stopped, they're older and I've stopped playing soccer 50 years ago. One of the other things we've got to have is a talented workforce, even more so than tax policy. What a lot of businesses will tell you, whether it's construction businesses or technology companies, is they don't have enough talented workers. And so places like Denver, who are magnets, and Austin and other places are magnets for young, smart people. We need to be a magnet for young, smart people. We may not be able to compete directly with Denver or Austin, but we at least ought to be able to compete with Indianapolis, Louisville, Nashville, Kansas City, and some places like that. And this is the kind of amenity that, that when you drive around a city and you look at it, you go, this is a city on a rise versus what we have out in the western part of downtown right now, which is, it looks like a city that is not on the rise.
That's a great point. One of the arguments you hear sitting on the radio for almost 20 years now in St. Louis is we don't have the Fortune 100 companies anymore, and we don't have the civic progress pride that we once had. Well, wait a minute. We've got guys who want to put up their own money for this. This is a Fortune 100 company. These are the millionaires. These are the guys that we should be helping to help us.
Yeah, there is a political faction in the city that is like they're angry at anybody who has money, and I won't get into their own politics, but how I challenge them is, okay, I really admire the fact that you have a big heart and you really do want to help underprivileged people, but with what money? Okay? The reason they're underprivileged is they don't have money. If we don't have big tax-paying either businesses, citizens, that sort of thing, if we're not growing our economy as a city, and I'm not claiming that, by the way, soccer is a silver bullet.
Sure.
It is an element. Mm-hmm. It's not big enough, not even close to big enough to be a silver bullet, but the flip side of that is it doesn't cost as much because it's not as big. And so if we want to be the city we want to be, and we want to be more inclusive, Dave Peacock and I met the other day with the head of the African American Contractors Association. They're all on board because of this community benefit agreement. So these owners not only love soccer. I mean, if they were doing this purely, if they were going to figure out the best way to invest $255 million, it would not be doing this and buying a soccer franchise worth $150 million. They share the values of we do need to. North St. Louis badly is in need of all sorts of things, including better education, better programs, more for our kids to do, more jobs, middle-class jobs, and that sort of thing. But where are they going to come from? I mean, where's, and then ultimately, where's the money going to come from all of this? So my more liberal friends, I'm like, listen, I love your values, I love your passion, but it'll take all of us. We need more jobs in the city, more tax revenues in the city, more middle-class people in the city, more kids in the city. We need more of everything. And this idea that we're going to factionalize in the city over political ideology, other places are economically strong enough to sustain that. We are not. We need to all come together behind these things to have more money for the things they want.
Imagine 100 years ago if it went to the vote of the people to see if the St. Louis Cardinals, right, or a vote of the people to build a weird stainless steel, wicket on the riverfront.
Well, let's take the Cardinals Stadium. I mean, that was people were really highly critical of that deal, which, by the way, ended up kind of similar to this. It was about 90% private money and 10% public money. That has been an overwhelmingly positive, just on the city, just the effect on the city budget. Overwhelmingly positive. When I was in the mayor's office, we had a year where we had a really bad budget, and unfortunately, we were going to have to give a 2-week furlough to our employees, 2 weeks off with no pay. The Cardinals went to the World Series that year, so it must have been 2006.
6 or 11.
6 or 11. I think it was 6 because it was a while ago. No, it was 11 because it was after the really bad economic meltdown. So it was 2011. Just because of the money brought in by the World Series that year, we did not have to furlough anybody. The second thing I say is to all the people who made the exact same arguments that we shouldn't do Busch Stadium. Think if Busch Stadium was, out in Maryland Heights or something, wherever it is. What would downtown be like? What would that part of downtown be like? I've actually heard somehow people say, well, we don't want to do this because we're subsidizing a stadium that 90% of the citizens or the fans who are going to go there are from somewhere else. Think about all of the economic, the hotels, the restaurants, the economic activity, even the arts grounds from people who are coming in for a Cardinal game, and not just coming in for a game, for one game, but coming in for a weekend of it. Listen, if we were a different kind of city, maybe you might go in a different direction, but until we have a job base that can support our residents, we got to give people reasons to come in, and tourism and conventions and sports are a big part of that.
Jeff Rainford is always welcome here, and I'll make a little note. Show starts at 9:10 here, just on Fridays, though.
I don't know what it is about your show, but I always screw up something every time.
All right, so it's Tuesday, and it's Proposition 2.
Proposition 1 and 2, but 1 is Metrolink and neighborhoods, and 2 is the small tax on businesses for the MLS soccer stadium. Polls open at 6 on Tuesday, close at 7. What I urge people to do is find out if you haven't voted in a while, where's your polling place, and think about your day and what time you might be available to go vote. People who make a plan ahead of time are much more likely to vote.
Jeff Rainford, thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it.
9:31.